Hi, my name is Erin Thorp, and on behalf of WomenIN, we'd like to invite you to join our webinar series. The link in this post allows you to register for free for all 5 webinars. By joining WomenIN as a member, you will have access to speaker and sponsor discounts and be entered into a prize draw.
Snowy Wednesday. I bet everyone was excited to open their eyes to that this morning. Thanks again for joining us for the WomenIN Wednesday webinar series. I'm just going to go over a little bit of housekeeping, talk a little bit of our sponsors, and then introduce you all to our wonderful speaker today. So general housekeeping rules, we do want to let you know that this is going to be recorded for members if they want to check it out a little later on, as well as we ask that you do mute and just have your video off, just so that we don't have as many distractions. And of course, myself, I'm Wendy Fortna, and I'm the marketing and sponsorship with WomenIN. And for these webinar series, we have some amazing sponsors. We have Tricon Solution, Solve Strips, Matthew Kelman, Enta Solutions Incorporated, ELF Solutions Incorporated, Coldwell Banker Complete Real Estate, Transend Management Advisors Incorporated, Your Soul Beyond, MegaPixx Media, and Calgary's Business. And for those of you that are new and don't know too much about WomenIN, we are a 2020 Calgary founded group that prepares women to transform the future by bringing the strength of your highest self to every single day. We align with women ages 20 and over with our hub of services, events, networking, and leadership. Today's speaker is Erin Thorp. Our very own Erin Thorp is professional engineer, certified coach, published author, and a member of WomenIN's advisory board. Not one to back down from a challenge, she has been disrupting the default her entire life. After being told to fix her emotional self for the better part of her career as a project manager, Erin set out to learn how to harness the power of empathy and use it as an effective tool to lead high-performing teams. Erin is originally from Alaska and has witnessed 24 hours of daylight and 24 hours of darkness. On to you, Erin. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. I'm so sorry. For those of you who have any questions or concerns, my lovely assistant, our lovely Karen will be monitoring the chat window. So if you have any questions for Erin during the session, please pop those in and we'll get to them. Sorry, Erin, now on to you.
That's okay. I'm glad you remembered that because I would have just launched right into it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time over your lunch hour to stop by and hear what I have to say around leading with empathy. We're going to just dive right in, if I can get the computer working. I wanted to start with this question: why empathy? Why is it important that we take the time to talk about empathy when we talk about stepping into this lead role of leading our whole self? A lot of the time I hear, empathy is something that we do with other people. Why is it important when we look at really taking a bigger leadership role in our own lives? And I will say it's because of shame. And I don't know if you all know, but empathy is the antidote to shame. The two cannot coexist together. And here's the thing about shame: we all have it. We all have it unless you're a sociopath. So for the context of today's conversation, I am going to take an educated guess and say that we don't have many sociopaths in the audience today, and that all of you have felt shame at some point in your life or another. We all have it. It's like I said, it's one of the common threads between us all. We're all afraid to talk about it, which is one of the things that makes it so prevalent, because unless you talk about shame, you can't get rid of it. So again, once we're talking about it, it can't coexist in the same environment as shining a light on it. So these are the little gremlins, that inner voice, whatever name you have for it, that keep us from stepping up and keep us from being our best selves and for asking for the things that we want. So especially as women, I think there are many shame triggers for us. I mean, Let's talk about appearance. Let's talk about motherhood. Let's talk about family life, about work, about friendships, community, you name it. There's usually some kind of trigger for us as women. And that's why I think this conversation around empathy is so important when we talk about stepping into and leading ourselves to be the best that we can, for whatever that looks like. I often get asked in these talks, well, what is empathy? What is it not? How is it different from sympathy or compassion? So we're going to take a few minutes and just talk about that here. First and foremost, empathy is connecting. So as human beings, we are a social species. We are hardwired for connection. We are not meant to live in isolation and alone, which I think, given the times that we're in the year that we've had, you guys, this has stretched us in ways that that we were probably not prepared for. And it is really testing our ability to reach out and connect. And so the practice of empathy right now is really important for what's going on in the world. Empathy is also about understanding different perspectives, different backgrounds, different ideas, understanding all of the things that make up diversity, whether that's race, gender, thought, identity, you name it, but really cultivating the capacity to sit with difference. Empathy is listening. It's listening to understand, not to respond. And I know that seems like a bit of a slogan or catchphrase right now. We see it in a lot of corporate training, but to actually do it in practice is something that is quite difficult, especially for those of us that are used to stepping up and taking charge. Interrupting that response mechanism is really, really tough. And so that's why it's important to cultivate and develop this practice of empathy. What it is not is I usually get two opposite ends of the spectrum with people in these conversations. There's the one over here that says, I don't do emotion, I never show it, I don't have it, I'm cool as a cucumber. And there's the other end of the spectrum that says, I'm a mess, I cry in the office, I can't keep it together, I take on everybody's feelings. And that really is a spectrum. But I usually see both, and that is not what empathy is. Empathy is not hiding from emotion, and it is not oversharing the most intimate and personal details of our lives. What it is somewhere in the middle, developing the capacity to sit with others and their emotions, not to take them on and not to be scared of them. It is also not problem solving. It is not our job to fix someone else's pain, to make it go away, or to make it any less. When we approach people with this idea that we have to solve their problems, it somehow minimizes their own ability to take charge of their own life and to be resourceful and to figure things out. So empathy is not, I need to fix this, okay? It's, again, that ability to sit with it. Quite plainly, empathy is feeling with somebody, not for somebody. So a lot of the times we'll hear, I'm an empath, I feel for everyone and everything. That's great. An empath with boundaries is even better because you don't have to take it all on. You can create a container of space that allows both of you to kind of make deposits into the space and to share the feelings, but then to walk away lighter than you came into the conversation, not heavier because I've now picked up someone else's burden and load. Do we have any questions before I move on, Karen?
Not from anyone in the audience, but I have a question. Suggestions on support or being able to set those boundaries, because that's something I've absolutely struggled with as an empath. But setting those boundaries to make sure you're still being respectful of them and also of yourself.
Absolutely. I think we're going to get into that and answer that a little bit later on. So I will hold that question. And if I don't answer it later on, let me know.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So I believe there's two parts to empathy. There's this inside piece, which is really talking about the inner work we do with ourselves. And then there is the outward piece, which is the part we get to practice with others. So I'm going to walk through both and then come back at the end and circle around how we can actually, what practices we can put into place in our lives that will help us build these skills. So the first 3 skills are the inside skills. They're the stuff we have to do with ourselves before we can go out into the world and practice empathy. The first one is self-kindness. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes the way I talk to myself, I would be embarrassed if it was out loud. And I would never dream of talking to anyone, even probably my worst enemy, in the way that I talk to myself. And it has been one of the big areas of focus in my growth in the last few years, is really to get a handle on this self-talk. One of the prompts that has helped me is remembering and picturing one of my very good closest friends, and then trying to have that conversation with them instead of with myself, because I'm way kinder to my friends than I am to myself. And so it's a good kind of pump the brakes, stop and check. What are the things that we're saying to ourselves? Because that reel in your head, that voice in your head, can be pretty nasty. And unfortunately, we believe it's the truth. So really stopping ourselves, asking some questions, reframing things, and challenging ourselves to talk to ourselves like we love ourselves is one of the biggest areas of growth, I would say, for myself in the last few years, that has had a tremendous impact on my ability to then sit with other people and practice some of the outward empathy skills that we're going to get into in a minute. I started by saying, we're all experiencing this COVID to various degrees in our lives, but there isn't a life probably on the planet Earth that hasn't been touched by COVID this year. And so part of being able to practice empathy with others is really remembering that there is this common humanity. There is this thread that is woven throughout all of us. And while we might be experiencing something that is traumatic or joyful or disappointing or frustrating, that chances are there's someone else in the world that has had those feelings as well, and that it knows what it's like to be in that position and can hold that space for us and share those feelings. The third one is mindfulness. And I know I have a nice little yoga picture there, but mindfulness doesn't always mean sitting in meditation for 20 minutes or every time something comes up in your life. We can be mindful walking the dog. We can be mindful making the kids lunches in the morning. Mindfulness is about presence. It's about really being connected to what's going on in the moment. It's about understanding what's going on inside you. So if I've had a really rough night's sleep, maybe the kids have been up, maybe the dog's been barking, whatever it is, and I wake up in the morning and I don't connect into the fact that I'm tired, that I probably have a little less patience than I normally would, and that I really just don't have the energy that I normally have. And I start my day without that awareness and that presence, I can end up taking it out on those I love the most, right? My kids and my husband get the short end of that stick. And if I'm really having a bad day, it's going to come to work with me. And then those that I'm in charge of leading or inspiring are going to have to put up with that as well. So cultivating this awareness, this presence practice is so important to being able to go out into the world and practice empathy with other people. So once we have mastered those inside skills, now we get into the outside empathy skills. These are the things we need to do now when we are in community with others. So whether that's a one-on-one conversation, a group of people, even a presentation. The first one is perspective taking. So I was trying to find this picture because I saw it one time and it was so profound in terms of the ability to take perspective. If you picture two chairs sitting around a campfire facing each other, one's looking out at the lake, the other one's looking back into the forest where the camp goes. And if you asked the two people sitting in the chairs to describe what they saw, you would get two entirely different pictures. One would paint this picture of the lake and the water and the sunset, and one would give you this picture of the trees and the tents and the camps and the campsites. They're both sitting around the same campfire with two totally different perspectives. And I think for what was profound about that for me is both are correct, right? Quite often when we are in community with someone, in conversation or in a situation, and we're passionate about what we believe in, we believe that what we know and what we see is the only thing that is available. And so in learning to take perspective with other people, we learn to set aside our perspective and to hold theirs and then give it back to them and then pick ours back up. Perspective taking is not asking you to agree with them. It's not asking you to completely change your way of thinking. You might once you hear them out, but that's not what it's requiring of you initially. All it's asking you to do is to hold what they have to say and listen and look at it and then give it back to them. And you can still have your own perspective. That's quite often this is a conversation that comes up with my kids right now, because I don't know about you, but teenagers think they're right about everything. And so getting them to be able to listen to each other and to us is one of the things we're practicing in our house all the time right now. Non-judgment is the second outside skill. And here's the thing about judgment. We are most likely to judge others where we hold the most shame for us. So what this might look like, if you're someone that carries a lot of shame around money, let's say, you will probably find that you are most judgmental where money is concerned. Maybe that looks like someone who's bought a new car, someone who drives an old car, somebody who wears designer clothes. That is where you will be most likely to judge others, is where you carry the most shame. So if you think about this in terms of where do I feel the most judged, or where do I find I judge other people the most, get underneath that and look at what is the shame trigger there for you, and start to treat yourself with a little bit of kindness around that subject. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's diet, maybe it's family. There's all kinds of things that we can feel shame around. And it's just not a very productive emotion. Shame ultimately says there's something wrong with me. Not that I made a bad decision or that I made a poor choice. That's guilt. Shame says there's something fundamentally wrong with me and I am unworthy of love. And what we know is that that's just simply not true. We are all worthy and we are all lovable. And so learning how to recognize that shame and then move from the shame into the empathy, and then be able to connect with others through that experience. The last two things we have to be able to do to practice empathy with others is understand emotions and communicate emotions. For most of us, we have very low emotional literacy. There's been a number of studies done where people are like, there's 3 emotions, happy, sad, and mad. There's a great movie that talks about core emotions and then all the rest of them, called Inside Out. It's a children's cartoon. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. But as adults, we really have to challenge ourselves to increase our emotional literacy. And we're going to get into that and how we do that in the practices in a few minutes. But learning to recognize what's going on with us, understanding our emotions, and then being able to effectively communicate them is really important for the practice of empathy. And most people think this is where it starts, is just, I need to be able to call out emotion and I need to be able to communicate emotion. But it's kind of the last part that happens, because we can't get to that part unless we do all the other stuff first. I'm going to pause there for a minute. Any questions, Karen? Comments?
No, just a lot of comments on the movie Inside Out is a great movie. I claim to have 4 emotions: good, okay, sad, and annoyed. I love that one.
There's different versions of them. Perfect. Yeah.
Some really great questions coming in. I think this is hitting home with everyone in the audience. So this is great.
Awesome. Okay, we'll keep going here. When we see empathy, what it looks like is attention. It's a really intense focus in conversations on both the verbal and nonverbal body language and nonverbal language. You probably know this, but most communication is like 7% words. So when we think about mediums like text and email and why we're so often misunderstood, it's because the body language and the tone of voice conveys 93% of the message for us. So when we're missing the body language and the tone, we miss 93% of the message, which is why practicing this is so important right now. So before we get into practices, we want to look at what are some of the common empathy misses, because we do these out of a desire to make the other person feel better and to connect with them and to be helpful, but they actually have the opposite effect. Okay, so all of these behaviors that I'm going to share with you actually drive disconnection, they drive disengagement, and they don't make the other person feel better. And as I share these with you, I want you to think about a recent experience that you've had where you really wanted someone to meet you where you were at, in terms of whether that was experiencing joy, sadness, frustration, anger, whatever it was you were experiencing, but you really wanted an empathic response, and maybe you didn't get that. And let's see if we can kind of connect some dots here as to why sometimes we go in with an intention to practice empathy, but we come out with a very different result. So the first one is we confuse empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is that feeling of pity or sorrow for someone. And so we say things like, oh, you poor thing, that's terrible. And if even just in saying that now, right, to you guys, I can feel the disconnection that brings, right? It doesn't make you want to lean in and get closer to me. You kind of go, oh, I mean, I lean back when I say it from you, right? Nobody wants to be pitied. Let's just put it that way. Disbelief. Has anyone ever said, oh my God, I can't believe that happened, right? Shock and disbelief. Well, again, the person may be feeling shock and disbelief, but what we're doing when we meet them with that is not understanding their shock and disbelief. We are almost validating that they shouldn't have been surprised by this, which then triggers the shame, right? So we never want a response that's going to trigger shame in someone. Otherwise, we are not practicing empathy. Blaming. When someone is going through something and we immediately try to find fault, to blame someone, to find a victim, or make someone a villain, we're using this story making, this blaming of people as a way to justify our feelings and maybe potentially even our bad behavior. So again, blaming someone else for what's going on does not make us want to connect to people and does not make us feel better. When we minimize it. So this is a really common one, right? Somebody's maybe going through some relationships trouble. Don't worry about that. You should have seen my divorce. It was horrible, right? Or maybe someone's kid isn't doing good at school. Well, don't worry about Johnny. He's getting B's. My Sally can't scrape a D to save her life together, right? We're making their problem seem small in comparison to ours. And what we're doing is we're turning the tables and we're making this conversation about us. It is not about us. It is about them and where they're at and their experience. And their reaction is valid. You wouldn't want somebody to tell you not to feel sad when maybe you suffered a loss. You're allowed to have your feelings. So we do it out of a desire to make people feel better, but we have exactly the opposite impact, right? We actually make them feel worse when we compare them. So again, that's going back to comparing our experiences to someone else's experience. Maybe we're using two friends to kind of go, oh, well, Jane over here and Sally over here, they had two opposite experiences, and see, you're going to come through this just fine. We don't want comparison. Comparison makes us feel lesser. Comparison triggers shame. All of these do. And the last one, I don't know about you guys. My husband's a champion at this one. Always wants to fix things, right? Wants to make things better. Again, heart's in the right place. His desire is to minimize the pain and suffering that's going on, because it's hard to sit with someone and just listen to what is going on in their lives without offering a solution. But quite often, the solution, unless asked for it, is not what is going to make us feel better. So love to know in the comments which ones of these stood out the most to you guys. And maybe if you can just take a moment and think about some of your responses to situations, which one is are you most likely to default to? Again, not out of a direct intention to be triggering shame in other people. Your intention is probably noble and probably very pure, but the impact that it'll have is not the one that you went in with intention.
Okay, we're getting fixing husband fixing things. I think that's a man trait, to be honest, because I can say every man in my life does the same thing. Like, how can I fix this? What can I do? Who do I need to talk to? Minimizing, man trait. It is. I think it is anyway. Sympathy. I know for me, the comparing is a huge one that I deal with with my in-laws. They're all like that and very one-uppy with each other.
Yeah.
Comparing, fixing, disbelief, minimizing and comparing, minimizing, fixing, sympathy.
Yeah.
Minimizing in an attempt for people to relate and know they're not alone. That's a good one.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so there is a way we can let people know that we can relate to them and without minimizing what they're going through. So we're going to get into that in some of the practices. Any questions right now that we want to take, Karen?
Nothing that have come up. Just, again, a lot of great comments. So.
Okay. Well, this is your chance, guys. We're running out of time. If you want questions, you better get them in there. So here's the thing. We've all been there, right? We've all made these mistakes. We've all suffered these mistakes at the hands of someone that's sitting across the table from us. And what I'm asking you today is to commit to a practice, right? To embrace the growing pains that are going to come, because it's going to be bumpy. We're going to try these things on. It's not going to feel, definitely will not feel like your old favorite pair of jeans. It's going to feel like a very crisp new pair of dress pants that most of you probably don't want to put on because we've been behind cameras and Zoom for the last 8 months now, I guess. So it's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable, but it will pay off and it does get easier. So I've put together sort of 6 practices. Basically, the intent here is to offer you some almost like an a la carte menu of, oh, I really think that that's an area I want to start to focus on. So based on what you know of the skills so far, what some of your misses are, I want you to just think about these next 6 practices that I'm going to walk you through and kind of go, does it address the area that I want to kind of start working on? And then how do I go through and put this into practice in my life? So if you're someone that needs to cultivate self-compassion, so that self-kindness, that awareness, that kind of common humanity thread, so those inside skills that we talked about, here's what I would offer. Learn to recognize the voice of your inner critic. So start to pay attention when she shows up. Is it in certain circumstances? Is it with certain people? What are some of the things that she says, right? Start to journal them, capture them, write them down. And then start to challenge yourself to change that dialogue. Would I say this out loud to my very best friend? Would I say it to my kids or my husband? If the answer to those questions are no, then maybe you shouldn't be saying it to yourself. And how could you change that dialogue? A big one for me is learning to slow down and rest. Rest has always seemed like non-productive time. I grew up in a farming community, and so it was like we worked all the time. Hard work was the way that we measured success, if you will. So resting for me seems like I'm being unproductive and lazy. And so I had to do a lot of work around changing that dialogue when I would need to rest and I would be on the couch, or I would be sitting and having a cup of tea, or maybe a glass of wine, or actually giving myself a day off. The voice used to say, you are lazy and you need to get up and start doing something. I would never call one of my best friends lazy. So how did I start to change that? And it looked like maybe we can sit down for 20 minutes and then we can go do something. Or maybe, today it's okay to rest and tomorrow we're going to go and, clean up the yard or do the things that we need to do. It doesn't happen automatically because I'm building this muscle. So it is a very consciously aware practice that I have to engage in. Otherwise, the inner critic just takes over. So this is where you can introduce the use of a mantra or a meditation to connect to yourself, and use your journal, voice notes. I actually have a lot of clients right now that like doing voice memos on their phone when they're out walking to just capture their thoughts instead of doing journaling reflections. Doesn't matter, but just capture what that looks like. Do we have a question, Karen?
Question is, some of us commit too much and people end up coming to you with their problems, which can get overwhelming personally and affect your own life. How do you create a balance there?
Yeah. So this is where, so what I hear in that question is there's this desire to fix, right? And one of the biggest things that you can offer, I do think we're getting into this in one of these practices, but I'll put it out there right now, is ask the person what support they need, right? So be really specific. Listen, hold the container. Sometimes all they need is to just be heard. And if you end that conversation with, what is the support that you're asking me for? They may say everything from nothing, I just needed to vent and listen. Thank you for being there. To maybe they will have a specific request, and then it's up to you to say whether or not you can meet that request. And if it's not something that you're willing or able to do, potentially there's someone in your network that potentially you can put them in touch with an extra resource. Just because they ask does not mean you have to say yes.
Okay, another question. How can we create empathy in the workplace and with our team in this new normal of working from home?
Yeah. I think it starts with you, right? I think it all starts inside of us. So what does your practice look like? And hopefully some of these practices that I'm going to give you are the outside skills you can take into the workplace and start to connect with and build empathy in your team. So the second one has to do with the ability to take perspective. We talked a little bit about stories. Here's the thing about our stories, you guys, we believe them as the truth. And if you go back to the picture of the two people sitting around the campfire, one looking at a lake, one looking at the campsite, both are correct, right? So mastering our stories is the underlying assumption or belief there is that everyone has a part of the right answer, okay? So the practice is ask curious questions of yourself and others. So every time you find yourself making an assumption, having an expectation, believing that you have the answer, challenge yourself to brainstorm other scenarios or other reasons or other answers. A classic one at work is someone's late to a meeting. Our immediate story is they're disrespectful of my time, right? They have no idea. They're just being rude and disrespectful, and there can't be any other reason why. Challenge yourself. Why might they be late to the meeting, right? There's lots of reasons. And before you draw that conclusion and that assumption, ask them, right? Reach out and check your expectations, check your assumptions, check your conclusions that you've drawn. Engage in the dialogue. I saw that you were 5 minutes late to the meeting. Is everything okay? Right? Instead of, you're 5 minutes late to the meeting, you disrespected my time. That's the difference. That's a simple, little, subtle, small difference. One drives connection, one drives disconnection. Noticing judgments. Again, we judge where we feel shame the most. So understand your own shame triggers. Where in your life do you feel the most shame, and start to pay attention to it? Notice how they show up for you. So notice where the judgments show up. Maybe you don't know where you feel shame, but you know and you can recognize where you judge a lot. Start to pay attention to those things and start to dig into what is that really about? Because once we become aware of it and shine a light on it, it no longer has control over our life. We can choose then to be in it or choose a different response. And again, it goes back to changing that dialogue. So instead of, if I know, that money is a shame trigger for me, every time I find myself having a judgmental thought or going to make a judgmental comment, around money, I can stop and choose a different response, right? Because I realize that it has absolutely nothing to do with that other person or that situation that I was going to talk about. It's really my own insecurities around money that's at play here. So again, we become in control of ourselves. Increasing your emotional literacy. So we talked a little bit about this. There's tons of lists of emotions out there, guys. Just Google it. Download a list. I mean, I found ones from 1 page long to 6 pages long. So many emotions in the vocabulary. And then every night, commit to thinking back to one situation in your day and read through the list of emotions and select the most accurate emotions for that situation. Here's how it looks. So maybe you had a particularly frustrating experience at work and you go, yeah, I was frustrated in that situation today. Reading through the list of emotions then allows you to go, oh, actually, I was feeling overwhelmed as well. And I was feeling really disrespected. And I was feeling undervalued, right? And now we start to crack open the vocabulary around what does frustration actually really look like for me and what are some of those underlying things that underpin that experience. Great activity to do with your kids, your partner, even at work. You know, this could be a great little icebreaker or team building because we don't have real strong emotional literacy right now, especially at work. Because we stick to the happy, mad, sad, you know. Sometimes we allow people to get angry, but we don't really talk about what's really going on. Favorite question, people ask, how are you all the time? How many people actually stop to listen to the answer? And how often do we feel like we could give the full answer? Because most of the time this is like asked in passing and people don't have time to stop and wait. So one of the things you can do is just challenge yourself once a day. Again, when you ask somebody, how are you? Sit and listen and really get into what's going on. Or the next time somebody asks you how you are, share with one person a day what's really going on. Instead of saying I'm fine, say I'm actually, you know, really excited today. I'm really looking forward to the Women in Webinar Wednesday. That's a real tongue twister for me. I have always stumbled over that. And learning more about empathy or whatever it is, right? But dig a little deeper, right? Don't skate on the surface. Let them know what's really going on. Again, not about opening up and sharing all the intimate details of your life, but allowing people to see a little bit more and giving voice to the emotions that you're carrying. And the last one that I would like to offer you today is this listening to understand. So one time a day, decide to listen fully without responding. Maybe there'll be a response, but that's not your first go-to desire. Your desire is to really understand this person sitting across the table from you. So you start by paraphrasing back what you've heard in your own words. You're going to name any feelings present. So this is a fun one to do with teenagers because quite often they'll say, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong. And meanwhile, there's tears streaming down their face. They've got their arms crossed. They're kind of vibrating and shaking. So clearly the body language is telling me there's something else wrong. So this is where you go, you know, I hear you saying you're okay, but I'm noticing the tears on your face and the fact that you're pretty closed off. Are you sure there isn't something else that you want to share? And really being present in that moment. Instead of just taking the words at face value and really helping people build that emotional literacy as you build your own skills of really what's going on. Because once we really know what's going on, a lot of the times, people just want to be heard. They want to be able to share what's going on, and then they'll get on and go and do what they need to do. So this has a huge impact at work. When we can allow people to express that they've had a crappy night at home, they're having a rough time in their family, that they don't feel well, whatever it is that's going on, when we allow them to express it, they feel heard, they feel validated, and off they go and they finish their work, right? Or you can give them the space they need to go get well or to deal with the thing that's going on, and you can manage the workload amongst your team. In doing that, it allows people to come back and invest even more because they feel so valued and they feel so heard. And this is where that piece of ask what else they need to feel supported comes in, creating boundaries with people, and really just even telling yourself at the beginning of a conversation, like, this could be difficult. They might be sharing some heavy things with me. It is not my job to fix them, right? My job is to hold space for them, to listen and to be present. And then I will ask them if there's anything else that I can do that would support them. I can't think of a single time when I've asked this question and it has been something that I have not been able to deliver. And more often than not, it's a thank you for listening. That's all I needed. So I'm going to leave this slide up. Karen will come to questions if there are any. I'm a big believer in, I don't want you guys just to take this knowledge. I want you to turn it into action. So before I get into kind of my call to action, we're going to just check in and see if there's any more questions.
Again, just a lot of great comments on praising what you're saying, creating empathy in the workplace. I wish this was stuff that was taught in schools. Obviously, it's important for us to teach this to our kids as parents, but it would be great if this was echoed in schools as well. And asking what people need is such a great question that I think is often overlooked. It can lead to helping people help themselves.
Absolutely. Awesome. I'm so glad you guys are getting something out of this. So here's where we're at. We're going to move to action. So what I want you to do is just take a little bit of time and think about, why is developing your empathy skills important to you? This is a really personal question, and everyone's going to have a different answer. Maybe it's a relationship at work. Maybe it's a relationship at home, in your community, in your family. But there's got to be some why in it for you to engage in this work. It's not easy work. It's not rocket science, but it does take practice and dedication to it. So there's got to be a good enough why for you to get engaged in this. The second piece is then to identify your most common empathy miss. So what am I most likely to do in a situation when I need to respond with empathy, and I think I am, but I probably am not? What is that miss going to be? We heard a lot of some sympathies, but lots of comparing, minimizing, and fixing, right? So making a mental note of, like, here's what I'm most likely to do, so that when I hear myself doing it, I can catch myself and correct myself. Maybe there is a particular situation where this miss is most likely to show up. Maybe it only happens at work, or only happens in your family. It doesn't matter, but just prep. It's almost like doing that kind of pre-work where you arm yourself with, I know that in this situation, I'm most likely to do this, and it's going to have exactly the wrong impact that I'm looking to have. So now I can be on the lookout for that magic combination of situation and person, to know that I might need a little bit more prep work there. And then I'd really like you to think about, what are the skills you want to develop, right? Is it that inside work, or is it that outside work? Is it how you feeling about, your self-talk? How kind are you to yourself, your level of self-compassion, your ability to be connected to what's going on inside of you, versus being in conversation or community with someone else and having the ability to hold the container of space to have these conversations. And finally, just committing to the one daily practice that's going to help you move forward and build those skills. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions if there are any, being mindful that this is kind of over your guys' lunch hour. I don't want to keep you right till the top of the hour. I want people to have enough time to get back.
Yeah, there's some great comments here. So for me, it's about being there for people. I feel that's the best I can do for someone to help or support, but creating a balance is where I struggle. End up feeling like I have to fix things. Another question, Erin, this is great. Love this talk. Thank you. Do you have any advice for folks who are worried about being perceived as soft, especially when surrounded by strong voices? For example, listening to understand is hard when you're in a meeting with a bunch of folks who push their way into the conversation. It can be perceived that you don't have anything to contribute.
Yeah, there's a whole lot in that question. That's basically my whole career summed up in a question right there. So yeah, as far as being soft, listen, I spent 15 years trying to carve this emotional piece of me out until I learned to embrace it. And it's literally become the superpower of building high performing teams. So there's absolutely nothing soft about being able to navigate an emotional experience with someone. It's actually the hardest work you're going to do as a leader. So first of all, it's not at all soft. You may get the comments that it's soft. And I would say, you know what, that says more about their level of comfort with emotion and some of these difficult things like listening, all of the soft skills that are extremely hard. It has less to do with your inability or competence than it does to do with their inability to actually just sit in that space with you. So if you're doing it, keep doing it, build the muscles, get stronger. And as far as being able to kind of get a word in edgewise in those meetings where people take over, this is where really being clear on what it is you have to contribute first. So doing some prep work outside of the meeting will really help you to be able to succinctly convey your message whenever you do find that space. And sometimes it's just, learning how to kind of nudge into those conversations. I don't know what it looks like in your meeting room. Sometimes I've seen all kinds of things, right? Years and years and years on a construction site. It can look really messy sometimes. So there's really no one way to kind of get your foot in there, but I think getting clear on the message ahead of time really helps you with that confidence to be able to give voice to your ideas. I hope I answered your question.
Another question, what can you fall back on to say when you don't know what to say, but still demonstrating empathy?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, I go back to just repeating what they've shared. So if someone has shared something with me and it's like, it's not been a very good day, I'm really having a difficult time dealing with this. It's like, I can understand that would be difficult, right? Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to that question. What is it you need from me to support you in this, right? Do you just want to talk? Because I can be here to talk.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Debbie says, I'm with Erin on the timeline to be my full self. Own and be proud of your empathy. It's what differentiates you. Model the behaviors you would like to see. Completely agree.
Way to go. Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love it.
Any other questions come in? Okay, looks like nothing for now.
Okay. I think am I going back to Wendy now or who?
Yeah.
I think look at us go.
Who's next? No, thank you so much, Erin, for that inspiring message and the presentation. It was amazing. I can see all the awesome comments we got, and I think that it's very timely in the things that we have to deal with. I think about just the verbal and nonverbal communication these days where we're not in the office with people and we're emailing and just pinging. Like, it really frustrates me when I have a video call with people and their videos aren't on. I'm like, this is the whole point of me doing a video call, so I can see you and your nonverbal actions, as opposed, if I wanted to, I could just do a conference call, but it's like, no, I actually want to see you. So I think that's very important.
And I think that brings up a good point is like, I think it's okay to say, like, I invite you to turn on your video, right? It really helps with us in communication. People still may choose not to. So you're not doing it in a forceful, like demanding way, but making that invitation.
That's good. I like it. I will definitely take that away for the next time, Erin. Thanks. And a big thank you, of course, to our sponsors and all of our board members who helped put this on. Just a little bit about next week's seminar. It'll be October 21st, and the topic is physical care, self-care. It'll be delivered by a panel, and our speakers include Megan Barefoot, Kelsey Davison, and Kelly Summers. Registration is still open, of course. Our website, WomenIN, so www.womenin.ca. Also, some great prizes we will be having for people who attended the webinars. And of course, if you want to hear more and learn more about us, you're welcome to become a member. It's all there in that link. And one more thing for Erin, if you guys want to reach out to Erin, feel free. Her website is www.erinthorp.ca. And I think our wonderful founder and president, Candida, is going to finish us off this evening or this afternoon. My goodness, it's been a long day.
It does feel like a long day already. Everybody, thank you so much. Erin, you know I'm your biggest fan. I've been a fangirl of yours for a long time. I can't thank you enough with this amazing presentation and just how the conversations that have been put in motion has been really amazing. For me personally, this is very timely. As much as we know all this stuff, we just have to get reminded of it over and over again, right? So thank you for all that you do for WomenIN. Erin is a great leader in our advisory committee, and really is that person, that our go-to person. So everybody who's attended, thank you so much for supporting us, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, thank you for joining us today. This video was brought to you by WomenIN and Calgary's Business, featured on MegaPixx.